All right, hi everybody. Travis here from PandaDoc. If you guys are just joining us and logging in, hello. I'm coming to you live from Tampa Bay, Florida, where the weather is about 92 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're dodging intermittent thunderstorms here. So hopefully our internet connectivity stays good. But we're just gonna give a couple minutes here for everybody to get comfortable, get logged in, figure their sound settings out. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and just hang out with my two co-hosts today. I got Pavel Hayes, our Global Commercial Sales Manager from PandaDoc. Pavel, you want to go ahead and just say hello real quick?
Hey, everyone.
And then I've got Julian Marcuzzi coming in from our friends over at Predictable Revenue. Julian is the head of revenue there. Julian, you want to say hi?
Hey, everybody.
And then while I've got you guys here and we're just kind of waiting, give everybody a couple minutes to get logged in. I always just like to borrow a fun topic that my boss always goes over with me, which is, what are you guys watching on TV? I just finished the Last Dance series through ESPN. That kind of talks about Michael Jordan and the Bulls from the 90s and their runs, and it was awesome. So if any sports fans out there that are looking for some good content, go check out The Last Dance if you haven't already. Pavel, you watching anything good on TV lately? Anything on Netflix that you're been enjoying?
I'm more of a HBO man. I just finished Westworld the last season and started The Deuce. Pretty much recommend any HBO show. They're all very well directed and the acting in it is amazing.
Westworld is one of those shows that I 100% thought I was going to love. And then I watched like 4 episodes and everyone's like, you just got to make it past the first couple of episodes. But if you endorse it, I think I'll have to give it another try. I have not heard of The Deuce. What is that about?
It's about 70s and it's based in the 70s. It's about the film industry, the X-rated film industry rise in New York. So it's very interesting, but
cool.
Probably not the best topic here. But it's James Franco. It's James Franco playing himself and his twin brother. So it's amazing.
Oh, I have seen commercials for that, and it's HBO. They have their own rules. They do what they want.
Exactly.
But Julian, are you watching anything good on Netflix, HBO, or all of the above?
Much like you, Travis, I just wrapped up The Last Dance, which was really, really interesting documentary. Next on the docket is I think there's a pretty good one out, 30 for 30 with Lance Armstrong.
Saw that.
I have a 1-year-old, just turned 1 on Sunday, and I don't have a lot of extra time to, unfortunately, catch up on Netflix and whatnot. And I'll be the first to admit, when I do watch TV, it's really trashy, bad reality stuff.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Below Deck, Mediterranean Below Deck is something that I just love. I don't know. I can just tune out. I don't have to get too involved. My anxiety levels don't go through the roof. So,
hey, I'm a big fan of 90 Day Fiancé. So
me as well, actually. Unfortunately,
as trashy as it gets.
That is as trashy as it gets.
They're doing some pretty funny stuff over there.
Yeah.
Just keeping an eye on time, guys. We know you probably didn't come here to hear us talk about TV shows, but hopefully you're all logged in. Earlier I introduced Pavel Hayes, our Global Commercial Sales Manager from PandaDoc, and Julian Marcuzzi, the Head of Revenue over at Predictable Revenue. Guys, today I am going to be your moderator and your host, Travis Tyler. I am a content specialist over at PandaDoc, and the topic that we are going to be discussing is how to hire and grow the best salespeople virtually. I think in our conversations leading up to this, a lot of what Julian, Pavel, and myself were talking about is that as sales leaders, really there's been so much chaos. It feels like 20 years has passed in 6 months. And we've sometimes lost sight of some of these important conversations we need to be having with our sales reps and how to grow them, as well as how to hire the right ones right now. So lots of great information, tips, and experiences that the 3 of us have been through, but especially our 2 sales thought leaders today. So look, got to do the housekeeping slide. Of course, you guys know this is being recorded. We are going to send you a recording. If you signed up for this and you are watching this later, hello, and we hope you're doing well. If you're having any audio trouble, try calling in through the direct dial number. Guys, feel free to ask questions whenever you want. We have folks here who are going to help us field some of those questions. I'll try to get to those when they come up. And then we're also going to do our best to share these slides with you, as well as during our follow-up. So I know those questions always come in, is this being recorded and whatnot. Let's dive right into it, guys. Look, we're talking about hiring and growing salespeople, right? So 2020, it's been a goofy, very tough year for a lot of businesses and organizations and sales reps. But we wanted to kind of take a look at how things were pre-COVID. And according to the Harvard Business Review, in 2017, we were spending on average in the sales employment industry about 12 billion training salespeople as a whole, 800 billion on actually retaining those salespeople, which leads me into this next stat of a 27% turnover rate for US salespeople, which is double for all other labor industries. So needless to say, the sales industry was something that in terms of hiring and growing, we were already struggling, right? And I don't want to just sit here and throw graphs and numbers at you guys of doom and gloom. You've seen enough of the employment numbers, but this one we thought was worth sharing that came from Indeed, the job posting site. Just to give you an idea, if you are a sales leader or you are a sales rep, of where we're at as of May 15th, year over year, job postings on Indeed were down about 40%. So fewer job openings. And as we know from the unemployment numbers, a lot more candidates available, right? So just wanted to paint the landscape for everybody and kind of set up our conversation for where we're going today. And as some of you may or may not be aware, Aaron Ross was originally supposed to be on this call. Our thoughts are with him and his family as he's dealing with some personal health issues. And but the great Aaron Ross did a podcast with us, which we have linked on the final slide of this presentation. You guys can listen, where Aaron and Patrick Downs, our sales enablement trainer here at PandaDoc, dive deep into the shifting landscapes of business in 2020. And one of the quotes that I really loved from this podcast that Aaron did and kind of set the foundation for this webinar we're doing. If you're not familiar with forcing functions, it is a term that Aaron talks about in depth in his books and in all of his philosophy. Forcing functions are essentially things that force us to take action that we otherwise were inhibited to do for one reason or another, right? So COVID-19 is one giant forcing function on both the global economy as a whole and just the sales profession in and of itself. It's forcing us to do things that we were putting off. We knew we should do, but that we really just weren't doing yet. And we're gonna dive into those here. Let's start off with depending on who you ask, right? So we came up with these points, surveying our own sales teams, our own sales leaders. And some people could accurately argue that, these may not be the greatest benefits, but nevertheless, some of the things we wanted to point out of what are the good parts of taking a sales team virtual and taking them remote. And hands down, it's got to be that there's a larger pool of talent from which to hire from. And I'm gonna have Pavel and Julian speak to these points individually and get their contributions. Just going down the line, we've been able to streamline our onboarding processes, improving what happens to a new hire once they join PandaDoc or Predictable Revenue. We're also able to increase the number of check-ins. And again, depending on who you ask, that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? But I can tell you personally, I'm having meetings with people on my team that I don't report to, that I wasn't having before, just building new relationships and learning from some new mentors that I wasn't, just because of trying to over communicate with teams. And then lastly, just improve reporting, right? Again, this is a forcing function. If you weren't already reporting on how your sales team is doing, it's forced us and a lot of other teams to streamline those dashboards, make them more available, make them more accurate, and making sure that we're doing a better job of how we track and grow our salespeople with that reporting. So I'll start with you, Pavel. Anything in here that you wanted to touch on, or anything I'm missing that you've kind of noticed of the good parts of going virtual?
I think everything you've outlined, you and I discussed. The larger talent pool has really been a big benefit for us. We typically didn't look at remote workers that often pre-COVID. And since then, we opened that up, and the amount of candidates we've been interviewing and the caliber of the candidates we've been able to interview has been significantly, night and day, basically. So that's been a big benefit, to be able to find rock stars out there that are looking for work because for one reason or another, they may have lost a previous SaaS sales job. The onboarding, we've been trying to come up with a standardized onboarding process for quite some time, and COVID-19 per Aaron was a forcing function for us to buckle down and build out a automated way to do it and a streamlined way to do it, which has been really helpful. And we're all currently going through it to see what the new folks joining PandaDoc would be, the process they'd be going through. We've been using Google Classroom for the first time ever, and that's been very successful for training and onboarding. And the check-ins, it's definitely good and bad. I try to keep it similar to how many check-ins I had pre-COVID, and let the reps be as autonomous as possible, if you can let them. And the reporting has definitely improved since then as well. We had to figure out what parts of the job we should be focusing on the reps, and what type of activities are important. So that helped us buckle down and figure that out. So things like stage progression, how long it takes for opportunities to move through each stage. We've come up with Salesforce dashboards to see per rep how everyone's doing, activity metrics. So those are all definitely good points that we kind of kept putting off and focus on the day-to-day selling, where now the forcing function made us improve all these points. So definitely agree with all of them.
Yeah, one thing that stood out that you said there, Paul, was the larger talent pool, that you're no longer required to just hire folks that are willing to relocate. Julian, I remember when we were talking that you had an example, if you wouldn't mind sharing with everybody here of what you guys have seen in terms of, a lot of your teams are already remote and you have different global offices all over at Predictable Revenue, but that larger talent pool, mind just kind of touching on that point real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Predictable Revenue, we had three main offices, essentially, one in Merida, Cancun, and Vancouver, British Columbia, where Vancouver was the headquarters. And we really didn't hire outside of these hubs. And as COVID hit, we said, hey, you know what, with the team going remote, that gives us an opportunity to potentially expand where we're looking for talent. And that led us to bringing on a really, really exceptional individual who's been in the sales landscape for 10 plus years. His name's Seth. He's out of Austin, Texas. And not only was that just like a huge talent grab for us that we wouldn't probably have had pre-COVID, but now we're tapped into his network. Seth knows all of these amazing individuals in Austin and outside of Austin, but now we're bringing on others who he knows in his network in the Austin area, and just making our business that much stronger. So we really leverage that, the idea of, hey, we're not having to only look in certain areas. We can really expand that scope.
Yeah, well said. And I think something for all sales leaders and sales reps to consider here is that you no longer have to necessarily worry so much about that relocation portion. So a possible good side about going virtual. Let's talk about the bad stuff, guys, because it's definitely there. And I'm not just trying to sit here and be an optimist all day. Let's throw on our realism caps. Going to go down the line again. Delayed feedback, on the spot coaching. It's becoming tougher and tougher. Some of the tactics we've relied on for years as sales leaders was to, in the moment, have that coachable session of after that call hangs up. Decreased collaboration is definitely happening too. Again, depending on who you talk to, some folks might tell you, actually, no, we're experiencing increased collaboration. And if that's the case, please drop some stuff in the Q&A and in the chat to let us know, what are you guys doing? But it can be hard to replicate the sales room virtually when everybody's kind of scattered. And other stuff, while we do have a streamlined onboarding as kind of a forcing function that we talked about earlier in the good parts of going virtual, not having that sales kind of mentor sitting right next to you, or even just somebody who's been there a month longer to help guide you through some of that stuff, sitting right next to you can mean a slower ramp up for that new rep. And then again, we're not going to harp too much on this one. You've seen enough LinkedIn posts about increased burnout. But I will steal a quote from our sales enablement trainer. I heard him say, going virtual, what we've seen with our reps is whatever you were getting before, you're just getting more of that now. And so what he means by that is if you had someone who had awesome output as an individual contributor, whether they're an AE or an SDR or an LDR or whatever they may be, if they were pretty stellar contributor, they might be experiencing burnout by being not being able to remove themselves, and they're like kicking it into overdrive. And then for those reps who are lazier and just weren't really getting stuff done, you're seeing more of that, right? So in both of those directions. But I'll go ahead and open it up. And Pavel, anything here that you want to kind of add or piggyback off of?
Yeah, I think the hardest part about going virtual is recreating the sales room environment. At PandaDoc, we had an open floor plan. We had 10 reps sitting really close together on calls all day. New folks starting would just turn around, ask a question to their teammates or myself, which is gone now. Same for managers, right? You're on the floor, you can hear people asking good questions, you call them out. We were talking about that, the three of us yesterday, and that's gone as well. So just being able to figuring out ways to keep that camaraderie going and assistance. Slack certainly helps a lot, reaching out and doing shout outs. But Slack, as I'm sure everyone can attest to, can blow up in general, so things get buried. So it's definitely that's been the most difficult part from a sales standpoint, is recreating that environment. And we're continuing to figure out what the best way to do it. We do general sales check-ins with the whole team daily or every other day, trying to figure out a good how to spread it out. And we're continuously trying to figure out the best way to do it, and still haven't found the best way, but getting there.
Yeah, for sure. I miss hearing the loud shenanigans after somebody crushes a deal. That was always exciting. So kind of not able to necessarily recreate that unless I go out and buy my own gong or something. I guess I'll have to do that.
Yeah, we used to play songs. We had close one anthems, so we used to play songs after every deal. Obviously, that's gone. I kind of send out a YouTube video of the song to folks, but it's not the same. Take a FaceTime with them. That certainly helps. But yeah, that's the buzz and thrive of a sales environment is difficult to recreate virtually for sure.
Yeah. One thing I would say that I've seen a little bit more traction, and for all of you guys that are familiar with the cloud messaging application Slack, if you are or aren't using it, PandaDoc leverages that. We have a sales wins channel that we've been able to automate through our CRM, where every time a deal or an opportunity is made, closed won, it then auto-populates with the information into that Slack channel, pinging everybody. And then it's just gifts galore, everybody kind of high-fiving, giving each other some pretty dank emojis and gifts in there. So we try to celebrate the ways we can. But Julian, anything you want to add to the bad parts of going virtual slide?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me personally, and I'm not going to harp on it, is the burnout. It's really quickly, when we first went fully remote, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not commuting 45 minutes in and out of the office each way. That gives me 45 more minutes to spend with my 1-year-old child. That's amazing. That's exceptional. No, what ended up happening is I was spending 45 more minutes, at the start and end of each day on my computer. And I've really had a difficult time personally being able to break away from, with the office being in my basement, to break away from kind of the work home environment. I'm sure a lot of you guys are feeling that. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later in the webinar. But ultimately, the big challenge is just like that osmosis that doesn't exist. My philosophy has always been, it starts with hiring really, really great people, and they're going to learn from one another. And that's much more difficult to do. And I think overall, when we're talking about the bad parts of going viral, things are just much more hard. Like they're just more tough. It's more difficult to have like a one-off meeting. It's more difficult to give that feedback across the table and say, hey, Pete, our account executive here, that was a hell of a call. Or Pete, you could have said this differently, or so on and so forth. So things that we did kind of off the side of our desk, they're not happening anymore. And we took that for granted. So we really need to make sure we're being intentional about carving out time and capacity to maintain these types of, whether it be conversations or functions or so on and so forth. So I think just the biggest one for me is that kind of, we're missing that osmosis piece now.
Yeah, that public praise also cannot be that, missing that component is hard. Shout out to my boss, Bethany, if she's watching, do a great job of giving me props if and when I need it. So let's jump into this, guys. Let's talk about the hiring process, stuff that we've seen be successful and not so successful. I'm going to pass it off to Pavel, who's going to talk a little bit about a virtual hiring event compared to in-person hiring events at PandaDoc.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. So at PandaDoc, we've done a lot of hiring events over at our office in St. Pete. It's a fairly small office, and we used to pack it with 75 folks interested in SDR, AE positions, kind of happy hour style. And those were very successful. I would say almost all our employees that have joined the team at one point or another joined the happy hour, and that's how we met them. And now that we're virtual, we still wanted to keep that happy hour hiring event piece alive. So we just recently did our first virtual hiring event, which I unfortunately couldn't attend, but from what I understand, there were some pieces of it that we wanted to share. If you are going to do a virtual hiring event, you should think about. So the first one is make sure you have a moderator, someone who, with an increase in your talent pool, these events, they'll have folks coming in, they'll probably have 40 or so people. So you want to keep the hiring event probably a little more controlled of who you want to invite there, so it's not overly loud. And so we did one in PandaDoc in April, and it was a huge success for us. So have a moderator that, as people join, they say hello to them, they welcome them to the hiring event, and encourage referrals to attend. At PandaDoc, we rely a lot on referrals. A lot of our hires come from folks referring other stellar people they know in their network. And for the hiring event, if someone does refer someone, try to have them join as well, so they feel like there's someone there that they know. And we also want to make it relaxed, just like we did back when we were doing it inside the office. We wanted to allow folks to come with a drink to the hiring event. And basically how we did it is we gave everyone a chance to talk. So once everyone joined, we muted the participants and had the sales leaders talk about the PandaDoc, our philosophy, the roles we have open. Once we went through that, we muted the sales leaders and let each person that came to introduce themselves, talk about what position they were interested in, and just kept it laissez-faire, really. So we didn't do any breakouts, which maybe we'll do in the next hiring event. But once that was over, then our recruiter, Alyssa, she's amazing, would reach out and schedule the follow-up calls with folks that stood out to continue with the interview process. But yeah, definitely limiting the group to keep it intimate in these virtual events is key, because otherwise it could run amok.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to jump to the next slide here. This is Alyssa. She's our senior recruiter over at PandaDoc. And one quote I wanted to share with you guys was, one applicant introduced herself, asked if she was the only one enjoying a drink on the call, and then many of us that were there raised our glasses to cheers and kind of just laughed it off. And wanted to keep the event light and informal. If that's your style and that works for you guys, you know, we just wanted to share that. And we'll jump into that in just a second. But after talking with Alyssa about the event, she was like, moving forward, like this is how she wants to do all of them. The candidates we've been getting from them, going back again to just a stronger talent pool. And the way we really promoted this event, if you guys are wondering, it was just all through LinkedIn. It was a lot of it with referral, like Pavel said. It was just, you know, creating a little mini campaign that the marketing team helped Alyssa with, and just putting some social media posts out there, spreading the word to our audience, and then sharing it within our network, and then asking our sales team to promote it in their own networks as well. So we go ahead and switch to this next slide. We're going to be talking about hiring assessments. Pavel, this is kind of your area of expertise. People want to hear a little bit about your hiring processes, both virtual and what it was like, you know, pre-COVID.
Yeah, and luckily for us, the way we hired AEs pre-COVID was very similar to how we had to do it post-COVID. All the interviews we did were done over Zoom. So everything from the first call, which maybe was done with Alyssa over the phone, but past that, we would have the candidates meet with a few of the sales leaders, our sales enablement manager, Patrick, and then the last step would be a mock discovery call, which would always be done over Zoom. So the process hasn't really changed, which helped us not needing to figure out how do we pivot from having folks come into the office. So that stayed the same, but I guess the questions we asked changed a little bit during the interview process. Things we started looking more for are, can the candidate we're talking to be autonomous? Do they have experience working remotely? So we typically look for grit, creativity, scrappiness. It's a startup. Things constantly change and pivot as far as processes, tools. So someone who has that experience, has experience working remotely, it has become a lot more important. And so just changing the questions we ask candidates has helped us zero in on who would be an ideal candidate. So we also rely on skills assessments, sending them out to candidates to take. And we had our existing AEs take the skills assessment to see what type of folks we would want to hire, our best AEs. And then we have folks take the skills assessment during the interview process, and it usually can give us a little bit of understanding. Obviously, we don't base our hiring off those assessments, but it gives us just that extra layer of understanding how that candidate might be, what they're like. And then, of course, rewriting the job descriptions. We rarely looked at remote workers, but just if you are able to, obviously depends on the business, hire remote workers, changing your job descriptions to make it known that you are open to remote workers you will be flooded with a lot more candidates out there looking for work due to the reduced job postings we saw in the beginning.
And then I'd just like to add a quick thing here too. Pavel's right. When I was hired for PandaDoc, we already had some skills assessments. I had a homework assignment that I had to do as part of the interview process. So luckily for us, you know, some of that stuff we've just kind of slightly tweaked. And to Julian's point and Pavel's point earlier, rewriting those job descriptions is huge, and opening up that talent pool to be like, you know, you don't just need to relocate anymore. It can be a remote position is huge, and you find yourself with some stronger candidates. I do want to just, if I can, we've got a couple questions coming in. I know some people like some immediate feedback. Let me see if I can just pull up some of these questions here. How would there be a larger quality talent pool available? Good companies are going to retain their best talent. Julian, do you want to talk a little bit about how the quality of the talent pool has increased a little bit? Maybe field that question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When organizations are going through some workforce reductions, they're going to keep their top performers without a doubt. The reality of the situation is that there are a lot of companies who have great talent that now cease to exist. And on top of that, because of the significant cuts that many organizations have had to make, we're seeing a lot of really great people. And I know people individually, good friends of mine, who, no longer are in work because of this COVID pandemic. So yes, I agree completely with the statement that good companies are going to retain their best talent. That's absolutely true. But again, there's been a lot of companies that have, forced to close their doors that have had some really great individuals, individual contributors.
And then this question, Pasha, you might be able to help answer. How do you get people to attend the hiring event? I'll give my answer first, and you can tell me what you think, Pasha, which is, if they want to be there, they want to be there, right? Like if they're hungry for the job, they're going to show up. But I think from a marketing perspective that I can provide, we try to do the best that we can with our website to try to promote the culture of PandaDoc and all the different benefits that you're going to get of working from here. But then I think I'll pass that off to Pasha to see how else are you seeing to do that?
Yeah, and I believe how we do it is we typically invite folks. We've done it a couple of ways. We have folks that have already applied for a job that, if we have a lot of people apply for the position, we consider doing a hiring event, because instead of interviewing each person one by one, we have the hiring event where we can relay the PandaDoc philosophy and our values to 40 people instead of one-on-one, and then schedule the interviews past that. We also use Eventbrite and LinkedIn for the hiring event. So on LinkedIn, marketing does a great job of promoting the event, letting folks know that we are hiring still. And if they're interested, they can go to the Eventbrite page and sign up. And I think at the end of the day, it's what Travis said. If someone is truly interested in working at PandaDoc, they will attend. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think so. Let's see, I wanted to, some of the stuff going on in the chat. Yep, slides are going to be sent out. Recording is going to be sent out to you guys. And then we'll answer this other question from Russ Peterson towards the end about what we look for in one of these events for our candidates, and we'll toss that back up. Let me go back to share my screen. Let's get back on track here, guys. But I know some of you guys like that instant feedback. This is a growing sales growth presentation. So webinar, let's go on to Julian, who's going to talk about growing salespeople virtually and some of the stuff that's important to him and predictable revenue for growing their salespeople during this time.
Thanks, Travis. So the one big piece to understand is that, at least again for myself and NPR, we don't need to reinvent the wheel because we're all now virtual. That being said, each aspect of coaching and managing is really now under a microscope. And what I mean by that is, if you drop the ball or if you miss the mark on a leadership function, the impact is now much greater. Issues are harder to resolve. Things get lost in communication. To put it simply, an issue in a remote culture is really magnified. So as leaders, we need to step up our game. So to kick off, talking about growing sales people virtually, it's really important to understand that training does not equal managing. It's a completely different function. Make time for both. Please make time for both. Don't have one big meeting with your reports that cover all aspects of their role. Coaching really needs to be bona fide training and not forecasting conversations and instructions. Next piece I wanted to chat through, and I think we've talked about and mentioned his name a few times now, is Patrick, who does sales enablement and training at PandaDoc. But he talked about the 7 deadly sins. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these, 7 deadly sins of sales coaching. It really resonated to me. Again, this was evident pre-COVID, but now it's just much more important to discuss and talk about and make sure that we're keeping these pieces top of mind. So I'll rip through the 7 deadly sins of sales coaching, and we'll kick off with number 1, which is you are inconsistent. So your sales coaching needs to be frequent and focused. Reps need that repetitive reinforcement, and not having a weekly or daily time where you can coach your reps is extremely detrimental to their development and ultimately the results that they're driving. I don't know if many of you caught it earlier, but Travis talked about the Last Dance, the documentary on Netflix, and it's about Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan did this extremely well. He was super consistent in terms of his approach. Michael Jordan was always shooting free throws, even though he's the best player in the game. He was always at the free throw line working on his craft. And that's one piece to this about being consistent. All of your reps need coaching, whether they're your top performers or someone who's struggling to hit quota. Everyone needs to be coached. So don't forget about the top performers. It's really important. In terms of, consistency and how often should we be coaching, it's a good segue to my next point. But ultimately, you definitely want to be coaching at least once a week at the very, very minimum. So that's the piece around about consistency. Really important to be consistent when you're coaching. Next piece I want to talk about is, that a lot of training lacks personalization. So every single rep that you're going to work with is different. What works for Steve might not work for Bill. You need to identify your rep strengths and areas of opportunities, but really understand how they best like to be coached. Some really love direct constructive feedback, while others prefer, a slow burn approach. Ultimately, really understanding your team members and how they respond to what type of coaching best is really crucial. Another sin in sales coaching, you look backward too much. So don't let your coaching be biased by the past. Always approach it through a new, fresh lens. I know we're running, we'll get tight on time if I keep going, so I'll try to be quick here. The fourth piece here is flogging the forecast. So you don't do anything other than hammer the forecast. Reps will always, or at least they should, have a good understanding of their quota and what their target is. Not the time to beat Bill down on being at 10% to his quota. It's really about coaching him to get that missing 90%. Number 5, you are having conversations and not making commitments. I see this quite a bit, especially in the player coach model. Really important to set goals that you and your rep or whoever you're coaching collaborated on. Get buy-in from both parties and monitor accordingly. Too many times there's no steady progress because the training is a conversation and nothing tangible comes from it. 2 more here and we'll wrap with the 7 sins of sales coaching. One being you're a crutch, not a coach. Again, I hear this often. If live coaching, let your reps make mistakes. You don't need to jump in at every turn where you think they're doing something wrong. Instead, take a note and using it as a learning opportunity. They definitely don't need to be perfect. Obviously, if there's something that's a consistent theme or you're seeing it come up often, then that's a little bit of a different circumstance. But again, allow them to make mistakes. They're going to get better by doing that. And the final piece here is ambushing your reps with data. Never come to a session with a bunch of metrics that shows their faults or failures. Again, not the place or time for this. And really, ideally, you need to give your reps easy, clear access to their own data so they're always aware of it themselves. And there's absolutely no discrepancy with what they are looking at and what you're looking at. So those are, again, at a very high level, the 7 deadly sins of sales coaching. We could probably take a whole webinar on each of these points. A couple of things that I wanted to mention specifically around growing sales people virtually. Encourage and celebrate days off. Working virtually is a big change for a lot of people, and individuals are really navigating the landscape. And really take time off yourselves. Like this, set the example. I've been really, really, really poor at this. I'll be the first to admit. And the whole do as I say and not as I do approach, it just doesn't work. So really make sure that you're taking the time off so your reps understand and they're comfortable taking time off. I just had a conversation with yesterday with our co-founder, co-CEO, Colin. And he called me out on it. He's like, you haven't taken vacation since I think November of last year. What's the deal? So he actually went ahead and forced me to take vacation, book some time off in my calendar. So do
Good.
that.
You need it, man.
Yeah, big time. So do that if there's those extreme circumstances. And then the last piece here on this slide is really tailor your training to address COVID. Like the one big thing with COVID is, and we were talking about this earlier offline, it's really shifting daily. Like what worked in terms of outreach when COVID first hit is likely not working anymore. And what works today might not work tomorrow. Really important to stay agile here. But this whole piece around COVID, it's very polarizing. Some individuals want to talk about it, others don't. Some prospects hate that you bring it up. Some really see it as being empathetic. I think overall, the big piece to this is be a human being. It's just be a human being. But again, make sure you're tailoring your coaching to address COVID.
And then guys, we keep talking about him. He's a local celebrity here. Shout out to Patrick Downs. But I stole this quote from him. He posted on his LinkedIn: training and ramping a new rep remotely is impossible. An amalgam of people I've talked to over the last 2 weeks. I'm sure the first time someone tried to train a salesperson in person that it didn't go so well. We have to adapt, y'all. I think that's important. A lot of the points that Julian was making do talk about how to adapt right now to this training. So going into pathways, Julian, you want to talk to us a little bit about what's working and what's not working for conversations around growing your reps and their pathways now that they're virtual?
Yeah, it's really interesting, like the virtual sales pathways or career pathing, rep development, however you want to frame it. One thing that we really all need to consider is that the desire for our team to grow both personally and professionally has not changed. That's still there. And although a lot of us here have been in this fight or flight mode and so focused on getting to the next month, make sure that the dollars and cents, we need to really take a step back and remember what is most important to our team. And there's a handful of things that you can do to look. A lot of organizations are not in the position to be promoting everybody, to career pathing everybody, and so on and so forth. But there are other options. There's micro promotions that you can make internally. There's horizontal moves. I know that PandaDoc, you preached that yesterday, Travis, and it's something that can be leveraged. But ultimately, really sit down, talk to your reps, understand where they're at, understand how COVID has impacted them, understand how COVID's changed and maybe it hasn't changed their view on their personal and professional growth. Make sure you're having these development conversations and really identify individual pathways for each team members. And you got to prioritize this. It's going to create better engagement. It's going to help with performance and really allow you to retain top talent in the long run. So that is it for me on this slide, Travis.
Thanks, Julian. I think the only thing I'll add there for some lateral movements that we've seen at PandaDoc, occasionally what we've tried to do is fluctuating between our inbound and our outbound AEs and SDRs, getting them to work both those muscles. One of the biggest differences I've heard from our reps is, the outbound folks, they if you're switching from an inbound role to an outbound role, one of the biggest differences is like, oh man, I have to do so much work now, like in terms of your prospecting that you weren't necessarily doing. You were just getting, fed leads or appointments that were coming in either through marketing or through an appointment setter, whatever it might be. But having that lateral movement has kind of helped. Again, to Julian's point, not everybody's able to do a lot of internal promotion right now. So just one example of being able to move laterally and grow them, have them working different muscles and trying out different roles in that sales career. We'll get back to the slide of assets and takeaways, but let's go ahead and jump into questions here, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but I'll get back to it in a minute. Let's see. I did have a question that I wanted you both to answer. For anybody that's on here as a sales rep or even as a sales leader, what would you guys say are some of the things that if you have done a virtual hiring event or you haven't, when you're doing those Zoom calls with the sales reps, what stands out to you that helps push them through to the next level to actually get hired by you? Either one of you can kind of jump at that if something comes to mind of what kind of skill sets or moments in those Zoom calls or those video conferences stand out to you.
For me, it's usually how well someone can tell a story and relate it to how they overcame a difficulty. Here at PandaDoc, one of our values is learning, making mistakes, learning from them. So if someone can own up when they made a mistake and explain how they learned from it and improved, that's huge. Obviously on the mock discovery call, just being able to portray their sales methodology that they've used in the past and implement it on the call with us. And just personality, right? At the end of the day, that's important as well. And Zoom calls allow you to see that not just by listening to them like on a phone, but actually interacting with them face to face virtually, but still it's helpful.
Julian, anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so we follow the A method for hiring, and highly recommend everybody on check that out if they are interested. And this process is really robust. And we've more or less continued to follow that as we hire virtually. The one big change is that when we were bringing individuals into the office to meet face-to-face, the last step of their interview process was to walk the company or department that they're going to be in through a game. So essentially they'd have to walk us through explaining a game, and then we can all partake in playing the game. So that's a little bit different now, but we still add a layer to that. And that gives us, like, again, the humanity side of it. You can really see something that's, how they act in a different scenario that's less more siloed, and it really gives us a great understanding and indication of who they are a little bit outside of kind of the coming across very professional and so on and so forth. So try to differentiate if we can, allow them to show and diversify how they're coming across.
And what was the name of that methodology that you recommended?
So it's who, and then it's the A method for hiring.
Gotcha. Cool. You guys, definitely some good resources. Check them out. And I think the only thing I would add to this, especially for some junior level positions that I've helped hire for in both sales and marketing, from my own experiences, sometimes we do look for some humility and being humble. And this is just me personally, anecdotally speaking. But I can tell you some of my best candidates are the ones who admitted they didn't know the answer to the question. And I like that. And I know I've spoken with a lot of other hiring managers, and they agree, especially for some of these entry level positions. We kind of are looking for the folks who are humble enough to not make something up, right? That's Sales 101. Don't just make up an answer for a customer and just be like, I don't know the answer to that, but I'd love to find out or get to the bottom of it for you. So something that could also be used in this virtual hiring, and just a note for both hiring managers and people trying to get hired is to check that out. Let's see, you might have one or two more questions here. Let's see. This might be a good question for both of you. From Michael, how are you managing the increased levels of interest and applications? I'm sure we all know the dangers of confusing interest and capability, and we can't spend the money on assessing all of these people and interviewing all of them at the same time. So Pasha, you want to walk through how you might work with our senior recruiter, Alyssa, and what that process looks like?
Yeah, so when we have a job opening for an AE, what we used to do is Alyssa would meet with us, and we had to do it again once COVID hit because we had to change the questions. So I meet with Alyssa. She asked me what type of competencies, background I typically look for as we continue to learn what type of competency and background makes for best AEs at PandaDoc. We're continuously learning. And so I meet with her. She asks me questions that help her find the right candidates. So what type of background, for example, SaaS would be ideal. How many years, usually at least 2 years for an AE position. And give her some ideas of questions to ask that I might be asking later on, similar to what we went over of how they've handled it, handled working remotely in the past, if they have had that experience, and if not, per Travis, just have them explain their previous experiences and how they learned from mistakes. So it's really just, it's hard with a lot of, when you have a lot of folks coming in, finding a needle in the haystack is hard. And having an awesome recruiting team in Alyssa, she interviews almost everyone that comes in. So having that gatekeeper to find out the right folks to pass through certainly helps if you can utilize something like that.
Yeah, I would say grow, if anything, the takeaway from all of that information that Pavel shared from his own experiences, work on your relationship with your recruiter. Like build that relationship, get to know them well, be comfortable being honest with each other about candidates that were no good or were really good. And opening that dialogue, I think will kind of go a long way with you if you don't already have a super stellar relationship with your recruiters on your team. You know, work harder to do that. Julian, anything you wanted to add here?
No, you nailed it. I think that's a big piece to it. I have a great relationship with our recruiter, and the alignment on the targetable attributes just like super, super valuable and obviously important. So make sure you have those ironed out first and foremost. Again, the who process really helps with this because it's like a 5-step process. So if it makes it past the resume submittal, then it goes to step 2 and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of steps that they need to get through, and as the steps get further down the path, and we're obviously eliminating. So we're really, I think do an excellent job at finding, as Pavel alluded to, kind of the needle in the haystack.
And then just keeping an eye on time here. I think I'm probably going to try to do 2 more questions. This next one I think is a great one. I have found it harder to recruit and hire commission-only salespeople since the pandemic. What incentives can be offered to increase resume submittals? Anybody want to tackle that? I can offer up my own. I think as a company, right, this starts from the top. Executive leadership has a lot of options for what they can do. PandaDoc does some really cool stuff, especially I think for younger, some millennial and some Gen Z recruits that you might be looking for. It's the little things. Some incentivizing stuff that PandaDoc does really well is giving like stipends for all employees, regardless of whether you're a contract or you're commission-based only or something like that. But they recently, because of COVID, allowed us to have a $150 budget, right, to improve our virtual remote working experience. And so like for me, I bought these AirPods. I was using some clunky, old school headphones, and now I've got these bad boys, and it makes me happy. I'm not commission based only, but I think little touches like that, building them into the budget. Again, if it's possible, we also have an education budget that you're allowed to use, about $500 per employee, to be able to leverage, on books, seminars, classes, trainings, workshops, whatever you want it to be, to advance your career. So those are just kind of 2 things that I can think of. Anything you guys want to add or that I'm missing here?
Yeah, I think it's leveraging, as you alluded to, Travis, whether that be, from senior leadership, just the philosophy behind the organization, or if there's an opportunity to, again, really add a layer to, people love their growth. People love their personal growth. They love their professional growth. And if there's any way to add a layer of that into your organization and discuss that, during the process, it's going to make your, posting that much more attractive. Those are 2 big takeaways for me.
Okay. I like that. Pasha, anything?
No, I agree with both of you. I think just offering something outside of commission of how you will support them and explaining it during the interview process is going to be key, because obviously commission only is hard, especially now. So just if you can explain to them how you will support them to get to their goals, having sales leadership talk to them about that, and reinforcing their trust in having folks having their back if they join, I think will be key. And
then I'm going to address 2 questions, but only answer one of them. So one of the questions is it possible for you guys to share your assessment questions so that we can learn from it? Let me double check on that. I will be sending follow-up emails along with predictable revenue to you guys with the recording. If I'm able to get those questions, or at least a handful of them, I would love to share them with you guys. And if nothing more, maybe we'll post that as a future webinar idea. Could be cool too. But let me circle back on that with our recruiters and make sure that they're cool with sharing some of those assessment questions. But to answer one question, you've touched on it, but how would you recommend attracting top talent, especially for smaller businesses? And do you utilize social media and how? Tips and examples. I'll answer this from a marketing perspective, which is we are really focused here at PandaDoc on building our audience on social media. And we do that in a number of different ways. First and foremost, we leverage the heck out of LinkedIn. We know that this is a business professional network that folks are using. And so what we try to do, and I try to do, is encourage and give content to guys like Pasha from my team and other revenue leaders at PandaDoc to be active on on LinkedIn, at least be checking it, occasionally post if they can, to build that network and that audience. Because what we do is we provide them a banner for their profile page that has, PandaDoc is hiring when we're hiring, which we usually are. And so that just having that branding, having that additional piece as part of each individual person and our own brand page on LinkedIn, so that folks who, maybe listen to this webinar today, get in touch with Pavel and add him on LinkedIn. If he doesn't have that banner, I'll help him get that banner, but a lot of us do, I do, and people are using it. So that's just kind of one pretty specific tactic that we use to leverage social media. Build that audience, start posting regularly, learn about how to grow an audience on LinkedIn via content and their algorithm from a marketing perspective. Again, that's where you're going to attract a lot of top talent, is through social media and growing that audience. Again, maybe another good topic, but I think I heard both Pasha and Julian say this, but like the referral program is great. Like, I know even if you're a small business, but you've use the power of your small organization to start leveraging some of your great employees. Like, hey, you got any great friends, and using those referrals and offering referral rewards if and when you can. PandaDoc has a generous referral reward program, so that's something too. But looking at the time, ask my two gentlemen, anything here that you guys would recommend for attracting top talent? Kind of a last takeaway that you want to share?
I think you nailed it right on the head. I think referrals are key to finding that talent. If you have folks in your organization that are great at what they do, they probably have folks they know, and just utilizing LinkedIn as much as possible, having them reach out and providing some type of reward. As Travis mentioned, we had one time where we brought all the AEs together when we had a lot of AEs to hire, and just did a session of, okay, here is the position we're going to be focusing on. Post on LinkedIn, reach out to every connection you think would be a good fit, tell them to recommend to someone they might know, and just use the network you already have to find those referrals. Would be my biggest recommendation there.
I didn't know we did that. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, nothing really to add from my side there. My first sales role that I had was probably like 9 years ago. We did a really great job of kind of expanding our scope and who we'd allowed through that first step. And that allowed us to tap into an industry. I won't mention the industry, the industry that, and there's a lot of referrals through this one industry, and they came on and they all crushed it. And this was through, like, we hired one individual from this industry, and they basically brought, two of their friends, and then two of their friends brought another. And we grew this great big sales team through this referral type of idea, and it worked exceptionally well.
Yeah, I've seen it work really well. It creates like little kind of communities. I started a place. I'm like, wait, you guys all know each other, like from before this? Like, oh yeah. So-and-so got me a job here. You're like, oh, cool. Good to know. Cool, guys. Well, we are right on time here. Thank everybody. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Pasha. Thanks, Predictable Revenue, for helping us host this. And I will try to get back to you guys on some of the assessment questions. Yes, you will get slides. Yes, you will get the recording. And I'll go through these questions here and hopefully follow up with you. Let me share my screen last second. There we go. Feel free to grab some of these takeaways. Add Pavel on LinkedIn, add Julian on LinkedIn. These are their titles, and these are the companies they work for. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn and connect with us to continue growing our networks and happy selling, everybody. Good luck out there, and try to stay safe. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Travis.
Yeah, thanks, Travis.